Morning, Chairman Hines, Ranking Member Stowe, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing. I am Nikitra Bailey, Senior Vice President of Public Policy of the National Fair Housing Alliance, the country's only national nonprofit civil rights organization dedicated to eliminating housing discrimination and ensuring equitable housing opportunities for all. I am here on behalf of more than 170 local fair housing organizations to make the case for a substantial investment in housing, such was passed in the House's version of President Biden's Build Back Better Act. My testimony shows federal laws and policies created residential segregation, the dual credit market, institutionalized redlining, and other structural barriers. Families that received opportunities through prior federal investments in housing are among America's most economically secure citizens. Those who did not continue to be excluded. Congress and President Biden can rectify inequities created by the federal government by investing in our nation's bedrock of opportunity, housing. We stand at a crossroad of several crises, a reckoning that demands an end to racial injustice, a pandemic with disparate impacts on communities of color, deepening racial and gender wealth gaps, and a housing affordability and homelessness crises, all of which threaten our future prosperity. Thousands of race-conscious housing, banking, and other policies established systems and structures that were highly inequitable and persist today. They created and perpetuated segregation and actually reshaped communities, setting up a built environment that connects place and opportunity in a manner that is highly correlated to race. Unfair laws also produced a separate and unequal financial system, rewarding white households while crippling and debilitating African American, Latino, AAPI, and Native households. They also generated restrictive zoning ordinances and policies that lock families of color in toxic spaces where land, air, and water are contaminated, making these families more susceptible to climate impacts. Unjust laws created the U.S. racial wealth, health, and homeownership gaps that recycle inequality. These systems and discriminatory policies also have produced trillions of pieces of data that have been used to develop technologies that then maintain disparities. Despite housing discrimination being unlawful for 102 years, prior to the passage of the Federal Fair Housing Act, long-standing discriminatory policies produced segregated housing patterns. As a result, Black homeownership, the primary asset of Black families, is at levels similar to when discrimination was legal. We've yet to move the needle on the persistent 30 percentage point advantage that whites have over Blacks in homeownership rates. More recently, actions leading to the Great Recession and the response to it created a net drain on homeownership. Black and Latino families lost $1 trillion in wealth from being steered into dangerous, toxic, subprime loans, despite many qualifying for safer and more affordable credit. While we have passed civil rights statutes to stop discrimination, we have not designed laws to dismantle the systems of inequality that are still producing biased impacts. In this nation, where you live matters. Your zip code is your destiny. Race-conscious policies favoring whites created today's disparities, and only race-conscious remedies can fix them. Bold, innovative solutions like the Equal Credit Opportunities Act, special purpose credit programs are already law. Coupling special purpose credit programs with Chairwoman Waters' first-generation down payment assistance can begin to address existing racial homeownership and wealth gaps. America faced an affordable housing crisis long before COVID-19 struck us. There is no city where someone making the minimum wage can afford to live in a two-bedroom apartment. COVID-19 made it clear that housing is essential and fundamental. The Build Back Better Act can lead us forward with a substantial investment in housing. It makes clear that housing's rightful place is among the infrastructure investments central to a well-functioning society and economy. Americans across the political spectrum overwhelmingly believe that every child should have access to safe, decent, and affordable housing, and that zip codes should not determine success in life. Republicans and Democrats support increased funding for housing. We commend Speaker Pelosi, Chairwoman Waters, and other members in the House for passing the necessary housing provisions in the Build Back Better Act, including the single largest investment in fair housing enforcement. The Senate should follow suit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Ms. Wagner.
When you look at our country's laws, there are a bevy of laws since the Head Rights Act that help settlers come to the United States to really start to help found the 13 original colonies. This is our nation's history. The reality, though, is that we have this opportunity through inclusive policies to change that history. That's what I'm here today asking the committee to acknowledge. We can intentionally use race-conscious policies to right the race-conscious policies that didn't include all of us. And we can, again, grow our economy by $1 trillion a year over the next 5 years. And that's only data when we're thinking about African Americans. That's not looking at the discriminatory impact for other targeted and marginalized communities. We all have a stake in this. This kind of inclusive growth will help all of us. The Build Back Better Act's $150 billion that's invested in housing that the House passed, critical dollars to further racial equity, but not just racial equity. When you look at a targeted down payment assistance program, 1.4 million of those homeowners are white. So when we take the step to use inclusive policies, we actually reach people in rural communities who are often left out by these same practices. So this isn't an opportunity to divide us as a nation. This is actually the very opportunity that we need to use housing as a fundamental right to bring all of us forward. It's the largest ever investment in funding for local fair housing enforcement, the very thing that we said we need here today. It includes $10 billion for targeted first-generation down payment assistance. This would be down payment assistance to families whose prior generations did not have access to homeownership. So again, 1.4 million whites, 1.7 million blacks, and 1.32 million Latinos. It would also include funding for the Neighborhood Homes and Investment Act, helping us to really get at the affordable housing crisis that we are experiencing all over the country, helping us to revitalize communities that were left behind by the subprime crisis, a crisis where we have to be honest, investors led the market and led it to a crash. It was the only time we had a privately funded housing sector, and our entire economy suffered.
Okay, I got 30 seconds.
Yes, in homes that are predominantly African American, we see them undervalued by about $48,000 per home. We're talking about $156 billion a year that we're seeing homes in Black communities undervalued. When you look at whole cities like Chicago, we see Black residents, and I'm talking about residents who were doctors and lawyers, teachers, they were our firefighters, they were ordinary folk just trying to make the best from themselves. They were steered into contracts for deeds. Those deeds cost them millions and millions of dollars. That's unearned wealth that ends up in our credit scoring system. So when we talk about credit scores and that gap between that 620 and that 720 that we discussed between Black and white, we're talking about race. And we've got to be willing to have that hard discussion, because only when we have that hard discussion can we come up with the very practical solutions like targeted first-generation down payment assistance, utilizing special purpose credit programs that are already law under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Can we grow this economy by trillions of dollars, creating billions of jobs and creating thousands of jobs and generating billions of dollars in very local revenues that we talked about today.